the problem was that I was trying to get rid of this and treating it as a problem. And actually, this is just yet another part of me that needs me to be kind to it. And then it'll relax and the ball of yarn will unravel all on its own.
Well said. I'm Elysia Skye, and this is the Brilliance Method podcast. Through mindful, motivational, and often hilarious conversations with thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and executives, you'll discover new ways to create your life on purpose. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the Brilliance Method. I am so excited today to have Anna Holtzman on my show. She is the host of the How to Trust Yourself podcast, which I'm a big fan of. As you know, trusting yourself is a hugely important thing in my work, and that we drive that point home here all the time. And Anna is a licensed therapist and mind-body coach who helps sensitive high achievers reach their big goals without burning out their nervous system. And that's a conversation we absolutely need to be having today. She's a seasoned career pivoter. Anna has worn many hats. We had so much fun chatting about this, starting in publishing, spending a decade editing reality television, and ultimately transforming her life after recovering from chronic migraines. And drawing on her own journey, she's guided hundreds of people towards healing from chronic pain using pain reprocessing therapy. Anna lives in Queens, New York with her husband, her stepdaughter, and her 3 orange cats, 2 brothers and a sister.
The 2 sisters and a brother.
2 sisters and a brother. That's right. Hi,
and
Anna.
A human sister.
Welcome to the Brilliance Method.
Thank you so much for having me here, Elysia. It's so fun to meet you, and I'm psyched for this opportunity to get to know you a little bit better.
Oh, my pleasure. And I look forward to being on your show and us connecting even more. So this is such a treat, not just for me, but for my guests. And, you know, a lot of people are talking right now about the nervous system. Like that's the hot topic.
It's become a fad. Yeah.
Good.
It's good. Totally good. I mean, we didn't know we had a nervous system when we were growing up. So it's good.
Right. We're just frantically trying to accomplish things. People please, not fail. And then we wonder why
am I doing all these coping behaviors? I don't know. Blah.
Correct. Right. So let's chat about that a little bit. You know, it's funny. It's become a fad, just like mindfulness. Right. I'm a mindfulness facilitator, and that became kind of a buzzword. So then we start thinking of what are other ways we can talk about this so people aren't oversaturated, but we're not there yet. And I feel like this is still a truly important conversation to have, especially with your background from overcoming chronic pain into trusting yourself. So how did that journey begin with knowing this nervous system thing is legit?
Yeah. So I'll take it just one step further back from that. My getting into learning about the nervous system happened because I was experiencing migraine headaches. And those started on the very first day of my very first job in reality TV as an editor.
Do you think that was a sign or a coincidence or a warning?
So it was really interesting when I got into chronic pain therapy, which I eventually did, and was helping other people recover from chronic pain. Something that I learned was that like the more common trajectory when people have chronic pain is that they're like, oh, something's like wrong inside of my body. I mean, that's like how we're taught to think about pain. Like there must be an injury, there must be like something unglued inside of me, and I need to go to a doctor and have it fixed. And they go through like all of these medical routes until they finally, like, as a last ditch attempt, they're like, oh, maybe I'll see a therapist. Maybe my emotions are possibly involved somehow. Maybe stress has an influence on this. But for me, it was completely the opposite way around. I showed up for like my first job as an editor on a reality TV show. You know, from your TV background, what a freaking high stress environment that is. And it's like, you know, this is like my chance to prove myself. Somebody else, another editor dropped out last minute. So they pulled me in, even though I had very little experience, even though it was I don't think they knew this, but it was my first time editing on Avid because I was used to Final Cut Pro. These are editing softwares for anyone listening who's like, I don't know.
Yeah, but that's stressful. And no
Super
natural
stressful.
Daylight. There's no daylight when you're in the
No
editing.
daylight, no getting up. It's like playing a really hard video game with someone looking over your shoulder for 10 straight hours a day. And I've never done it before at that point. So So like by the middle of the day or sometime early in that first day, I just started having, probably some version of a panic attack. I just started getting like really blanked out and my heart rate was going so fast. And all these other things were happening. It wasn't just the headache. It was like sweating balls and losing my mind and also getting a very intense headache, which was, I wasn't a person who got headaches back then. So that was like an unknown to me, but it was very clear to me that it was related to stress. So yeah, right from the get-go, I knew it had to do with stress. I didn't have the language of nervous system stuff back then. And this was in, I don't know, 2007. But from there, I worked in TV for about 10 years.
Wait, you did that for 10 more years after that was your day one? God bless you. Oh my goodness.
I mean, obviously the first day is the most stressful, right? So it's not like every single day was like that, but it's a very high intensity, high stress career.
There could be a coaching niche just for people in entertainment, and there probably is, right?
Oh, there totally is. Yeah. And I've made friends with a number of people who I met while working in television, who've left and become therapists and coaches.
Thank God for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. So 10 more years,
I love it.
Stuck with it. You're loyal.
So I did that for about 10 years and I continued. That was the first time I got a bad headache. And I continued to get headaches sporadically as I continued to work in that field. But it didn't feel like such a big deal. It was like once in a blue moon. And I would just take an over-the-counter painkiller and it would go away. Over the years, the headaches became more frequent and more of like this is kind of something I'm dealing with in my life.
I mean, that's terrifying. I'm a cancer survivor. So I would I'm not a, hypochondriac, but I would immediately be like, do I need a brain scan? Like when something comes out of nowhere and shows up chronically, there is a problem. And we seem to go, either I don't have time to deal with this or I'm just going to keep putting a Band-Aid on it. Right.
Yeah. I was the Band-Aid route. And it's interesting because a lot, as I later worked with a lot of people who have had chronic pain for years, most of them go into like, I need to get a brain scan and get very focused solely on the physical side of things.
Sure.
But I was sort of the opposite. I did eventually mention to like a general practitioner doctor that I was getting headaches, and the doctor recommended me to go to a neurologist, which I did. And they recommended prescription painkillers, which I was more than happy to take. But eventually they also recommended getting a brain scan. And I was just like, I'll pass on that because I just knew that it was like emotional and stress related. It was very obvious to me that it was. You have a good
intuition.
I trusted my intuition, even though I didn't have a ton of information about what was going on or how to help myself. I did trust that inkling of intuition. And then, so flash forward, I eventually left television, not because of the headaches, but because like I had gotten into it because I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to make independent films. I made some attempts to get that going and they just didn't go anywhere. I didn't have the stick-to-itiveness to live through the discomfort of being told no a million times.
Sure. And not for nothing, it gets really expensive.
It gets really expensive. And I would say for me, the most expensive part of it is the rejection, the amount of emotional rejection and the toll that can take. But I finally decided like I never intended to work in reality TV my whole life. And I decided to make a career change. I got a coaching certification because I was very much I was going to therapy. I found that really helpful and interesting. I was into self-help stuff. And so I got a coaching certification. And then from there, I went to grad school for mental health counseling.
That's right.
Eventually got my license as a therapist. And when I was in grad school, those headaches, they were diagnosed as migraine headaches, that's when they really spun out of control.
Oh.
Interestingly, it was in grad school. And I had thought when I was working in TV and the headaches were like getting worse and worse by the end, I was like, maybe when I leave television and go to therapist school, the headaches will go away because I'll be leaving this very stressful career that's also in many ways very out of alignment with my values, like a lot of the crap that we were putting on TV. There was plenty of good stuff that I got to work on, but also a lot of crap.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I thought, and I'll go to grad school where we're going to be talking about our feelings and I can be myself. And I thought the headaches will go away.
You're describing
And
grad school like it's a wellness retreat.
I know, but that was so naive. It
It's
wasn't like
okay.
that.
We just hear so many college kids dealing with, pain and
Yeah.
emotional stress and trauma. So, but not for nothing, like, applause to you for starting your life anew, because people are often feeling like they can't start over at a certain age or a certain, you've put 10 years into a career and then you said, screw it. I'm going to school. I'm going and I'm moving into a path that my soul feels aligned with, and I'm going to do the hard work to make it count. And that is beautiful and inspiring. And you just gave everyone listening and watching permission to do the same if they are calling for that in their heart. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for reflecting that. And by the way, it was like the third major pivot I made in my career. So I studied architecture in college.
What?
Like, I was on the track to be an architect. I very briefly worked in that field right after school. And then I pivoted to publishing and I worked at a design magazine.
That's right. I did know that. Mm-hmm.
For like 4 years. And then I pivoted to reality TV. And each one was like a major, not just a career shift, but it's like a major identity shift. When I left publishing for reality TV, everyone I previously worked with was like, what? You're doing what? Reality television? Why would you want to do that? Maybe not everyone, but a few people definitely reacted that way.
Well, it's because you trust yourself. And what's interesting from a bird's eye perspective, architecture, right? Building, creating, publishing, building, creating, editing, building, creating, right? And then here you are as a coach, a healer, a teacher, building and creating new reflections, frameworks of mindset, healing, right? You're still doing it.
Yeah. And there's so many different threads you can pull, because the one I always think about is storytelling. Like even with architecture is a form of storytelling.
Oh, yes.
Writing, certainly a form of storytelling. Television, storytelling. And as an editor, you're analyzing human behavior really up close. You're like watching the same speech pattern over and over again, trying to find the through thread of like, what is this person actually saying? Which to me is so related to coaching and therapy.
Yeah, editing is very intimate, isn't it?
Very intimate. You're really getting to know someone's quirks.
So getting hired as an editor over and over, they truly trust you with that story and with that energy. Okay, I want to go back to you did grad school, but real quick, I want to tell you something. So when I was interviewing plastic surgeons for my reconstructive surgery after breast cancer, the woman I landed on, Dr. Lisa Castleth, I had my consult with her. And I said, what's your background? How'd you get into plastic surgery? And she said, well, I went to college for architecture. And
that totally makes sense.
Right. And she said, and I'm really into horror movies. So like blood doesn't bother me.
Whoa.
I'm like, this is the perfect combination.
Amazing. That's amazing.
That's pretty great. Okay. So now you're in grad school. The migraines are they're getting worse, right?
They got worse. And in hindsight, the way I understand what was happening was that I put myself in a situation that I thought would be very in alignment with me. Like I thought it would be very much in tune with my values and my vibe and the way I wanted to work with emotion. But a lot of what I encountered, some of what I encountered there did feel in alignment, and a lot of it did not, and felt like totally, I was in a great deal of conflict with a lot of what we were being taught, which was, this pathologizing approach to emotional issues, viewing emotional responses to life experiences as disorders, that kind of old school mindset. And I just felt so upset about it and in conflict with it while having to, you know, agree with it on the surface in order to pass my classes and all that stuff. And I think that not only inner conflict, but inner conflict about something that I cared about a lot, that was very important to me, created just this hotbed of tension inside my body. And so that's when the migraines, like I didn't consider it a big issue in my life up until then. That's when it really took over and was threatening to prevent me from having a career as a therapist, because I was having to miss classes. I was having to cancel appointments with clients at my clinical internship. You know, I couldn't function in a reliable way because of these headaches.
That's heartbreaking.
It was really rough. And it's kind of hard even to like connect back to what it felt like at the time, because at the time I felt like it was so overwhelming. I felt scared, hopeless, like, you know, what's happening to my life kind of thing. And that is such a thing of the past for me now that it's like amazing to even look back at that. But because of the desperation that I was in then to find help, I did something that most people do the first time they get a twinge of pain, which is I went to Google. I just hadn't done that before.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really, I had very fortunate timing because this was 2018. And there's been a body of work around mind-body medicine for chronic pain that's been around for a long time. You know, books and materials on how to recover from chronic pain through the mind-body connection. But it just like wasn't widely available, wasn't widely known. And right around the time that I went to Google, this stuff was becoming more widely accessible through the internet. And through my Google searches, I got a targeted ad in my Facebook feed for something called the Curable app, which totally changed my life. And I highly recommend it. I'm not getting paid to say that, but I mean, it changed my life. And it's an app that teaches you how to heal yourself basically through methods that are most heavily influenced by this guy named Dr. John Sarno, who wrote a whole bunch of books. I think his most famous one is Healing Back Pain. But he wrote about this approach to recovering from chronic pain through changing your understanding of what pain is and how it's created in the nervous system as a response to danger or perceived danger. That in a very small nutshell, the idea is that the nervous system creates pain sensations when the nervous system perceives threat or danger. So that could be like you broke your bone and the nervous system's like, danger, danger, I'm going to send these pain signals. But it could also be, I'm having a very tense relationship dynamics and I'm not standing up for myself. And the nervous system's like, this is not safe. I'm going to create pain signals somewhere in your body that's going to get your attention.
Wow. I've never heard it explained that way. That's
I
awesome.
hadn't either.
Wow. Yeah.
And it immediately made sense to me. One of those.
Since the middle of August or so, I was starting to feel some neck pain and some back pain. And I just was kind of noticing it and not really making a big deal about it, not Googling it and just going, I was diagnosed with scoliosis as a kid. I wonder if it's like starting to manifest now that I'm in my 40s. And what is that? And then in October, I fell and broke my elbow. And it fractured the radial head of my elbow. And then I don't remember the name of this bone, but there's a fracture in this bone. So it's still healing even now at the time we're recording this towards the end of January here. And the pain in my neck and my back has gotten so bad since I broke the elbow. And it's like, my doctors can't figure out how to connect it. And hearing you talk about this, and thinking about how stressful that time period was for me, even before I fell, which I feel like was probably part of why I fell, because I was just
That
spinning,
happens.
right?
Yeah.
I think my
Yeah.
body was
When we're
like,
tensing and bracing. Yeah.
So there's something there. Thank you for suggesting that app. It's called Curable. And Anna's
Yeah.
link to it will be in the description below. And again, this is not a paid promotion. It just truly, truly helped her. So, okay, tell me more.
Well, yeah. So it was kind of the missing piece that I'd been looking for all along, because I had been, I'd go to my neurologist and I'd say, hey, I feel like this is probably stress and emotion related. And they'd be like, yeah, that could be a factor. And then they'd just prescribe more medication, which is, because that's what their training is in. But I was like, I wish someone could like help me. Okay, so if it's stress and emotion related, what can I do with that?
Yeah.
And what I learned initially through this app, and then, I went way down the rabbit hole. So the app was the starting point. And then, any book I could get my hands on, I read. I went to workshops. I became part of this community of chronic pain recovery therapists and physicians. And it's just like, my head exploded basically. Yeah, it completely changed my life. The recovery from migraine was a long story. This was not like an instantaneous, like I
Yeah,
downloaded
of
the app
course.
and healed. It was over the course of a few years, but it was so life-changing that became the focus once I graduated of the therapy work I was doing. And I was coaching people in this as well. And yeah, more recently, my work has expanded into its next evolution, but that's how I got into working with the nervous system.
Wow. And as it should expand. And a lot of people get so hung up, even going back to what I said about you put 10 years into your editing career, can I change,
Yeah.
right? And then you really focused on helping people heal with chronic pain. And then that became a part of your brand. That's when you launched your podcast, and it's a
Yeah.
big part of your identity as a coach. And then you get to ask yourself again, it's time to change. It's time to pivot, pivot, pivot. And you're
Yeah.
so great at trusting yourself to pivot. And I wish more of us would do that when we feel called to do it, because it can be scary. There could be risk, financial
Yes.
risk. There could be emotional risk. There could, identity connection risk.
Here's what I would love to say to like anyone who's listening to us right now is that when clients come to me, and the clients who are coming to me now are most of them they're wanting to pivot, or they're wanting to come back to a creative calling and, actually make a go of it. And what I hear over and over again is like, well, I don't know if I'm cut out for this because I have so much fear. And what I share with my clients, and I'll share with anyone who will listen, is I am someone who feels things intensely. So I feel the pull to pivot when I reach those points in my life when it's time for me to do something new. I feel that pull very intensely. And I also feel the fear so intensely. like I feel like I'm completely losing my mind level intensity of fear. And I think this is why I love helping people with this, because I'm like, I feel fear so intensely that it's like I don't even think I can get out of bed, let alone move through the fear and do the thing I want to do. And I've had to learn and develop and, concoct all these different tools to help me get through it, because it can honestly feel like my skin's about to melt off of me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can relate to that.
I totally can relate to that. And I go into avoidance behavior pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was feeling a lot of fear last year because I spent 3 years building and developing a beautiful group coaching program called the Sapphire Collective of the Brilliance Method. And then I realized it was time to pause it so that I could launch and do this podcast. And I wanted to do a membership. I want to get back into speaking on stages and getting in front of bigger audiences. So I'd reduced my income by about 90%. So this doesn't pay the bills yet. So a lot of fear around that, because I have a nice life. We have a nice lifestyle. Instead of really dealing with that fear in probably a process like you'll be doing with your journaling workshop this week. Unfortunately, by the time this airs, that will have been done, but maybe there'll be another one. So follow her website.
Absolutely.
There will be another one. So check the website description below, follow her events. So I paused everything I was doing. This is summer of 2024.
Yeah.
I followed the band Pearl Jam everywhere. I even went to
Amazing.
Australia. I had so much fun. I was having so much fun. And I'm like, you know what? I worked my ass off in 2020 when most people didn't do anything. And a lot of people did stuff, but most people got a chance to just sit back and collect some cash and, take a reprieve. I didn't, because I know how to do remote production. I was busier than anyone I knew. And then I was launching my coaching business on the side. And I realized I hadn't taken a break, and I'm a big advocate to avoid burnout. And I hadn't burned out. I was like, I need to do this so that I don't burn out. But then I kept going. I did the May tour, I did the summer tour, and then I decided to add the fall tour in Australia. And my husband was like, do you think you're going through a midlife crisis? Because you probably should be like now rebuilding after a few months, and you're still just leaving town and, going through savings and selling stocks. And I was like, let's sell one of our houses. That was my response. So, so we sold one of our properties. We own a handful of properties here in Nashville. I was like, let's sell one of those. I can buy myself more time.
Amazing.
It's fine. No regrets. But here we are, early 2024. And I'm like, okay, now I feel motivated and inspired, but I needed that break.
Yeah.
And I think there was fear going on that I wasn't ready to look at until I played and had fun.
And talk about trusting yourself. I mean, I think the money fears for many of us, maybe most of us, maybe all of us, I think those tend to rear up the loudest when we're making a pivot. And usually making a pivot, not always, but often it means having an income dip, at least initially.
Yeah. And I think that's probably where some of the back pain started coming from, because I did have financial fears, and I'm still working through rebuilding my income right now. And I think that and thank goodness for production gigs, and I still have my one-on-one clients, and I'm building my membership. But girl, I think part of it was, even on a subconscious level, rattling me.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a ton of sense to me. I will say I decided to pivot my coaching practice just a few months ago. So we're in January now. So I think I decided in October and started making moves on it in early November-ish. And I won't say I'm now just buoyant with confidence and, fearlessness and all that. I am still using my journaling practice on a daily basis to continue working through this transition period. But initially, during the initial month and a half of it, I was just waking up in a cold sweat every single morning. And most of the time, the first thought was how am I going to make money? Because I knew how to make money doing what I was doing before. And this new thing is new and it's not proven yet.
Right. But we say that, but it is proven, because you're such a great result of what you've done. And other people have proved that this methodology works. So that's why that app is successful and all the other things, right?
And also, it's that's the fear voice is saying this is completely new and this is completely unproven. And I mean, the funny thing was, the people I was most afraid to talk about my pivot with were my friends and peers in the chronic pain recovery coaching world. And
why is that?
Because it just, to me internally, it felt like an identity shift. I had built this identity over the course of 5 years. I had built friendships from that identity. Yeah. And also, I still haven't quite figured out why, but I had this sense of we all are friends and we all have this allegiance to doing this similar work. And we're building this field of chronic pain recovery, because it's like a newly blossoming field. It's we're building something together and we're all promoting each other and helping each other. And I had this sense of I'll be cast out from the tribe if I say I'm doing something a little different. that did not happen at all. I mean, all my friends and peers and colleagues have been nothing but supportive and encouraging. And, they're all like, this just seems like a natural extension of what you're already doing.
There it is, right?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Gay Hendricks?
Yeah, but not like, I'm not a deep diver.
Okay. I'm a deep diver with Gay. And in Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, hidden barrier number 2, disloyalty and abandonment. The hidden barrier says, I will end up all alone. I'll be disloyal to my roots. I'll leave behind the people from my past if I step into my zone of genius.
Completely. That describes what I was experiencing to a T. And one of the things that actually helped me, in addition to my journaling practice, which is my rock and my anchor and my thing, but also looking back and remembering when I pivoted from television to coaching, I had the exact same fears and thoughts, like it was scripted, and the script just showed up again unchanged.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember what I said when you told me you stayed in television for 10 years after the headache? I said, she's loyal, right? It's just who you are at your core. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the TV thing, that felt like a different shift. I mean, I very much wanted out of that job. But I didn't want out of my friends. I made really great friends working in that field.
Totally. And there's some perks, and some of them are really fancy and fun. And
yes, the golden handcuffs was definitely a big part of that. It was good pay, and it offered me flexibility in a lot of ways.
Fair. And how old were you when you pivoted from architecture to television and then publishing? Can you give me those age ranges? Because I think that's going to inspire people.
27, 37, 47.
Yes. What are we doing? What are we doing 9 years from now?
I have a oh my gosh, I'm about to turn blank zero crisis 3 years before I turn that age, apparently once a decade.
Oh my gosh. And you're 48, right?
I'm going to turn 48 next month.
Turning 48 next month. Okay. So by the time this is out,
I'll be 48.
Okay, cool. So we've got you on this genre for at least another 8 or 9 years, according to this path, and then we get to see how you expand upon it.
And it will definitely happen. I feel certain.
It's gonna be great. Oh my gosh, I love it so much. All right, so you mentioned the journaling process, and when you were talking about going through that chronic pain, and this journaling process helped you pivot from that. And then now it's helping you in helping people truly trust themselves and find their path. You use the word melt, and you've got your workshop coming up, and there will be other workshops in the future. So obviously we don't have time to do the whole workshop, but could you walk us through the process a bit and maybe give our audience a hint on how to get started on their own?
Absolutely. So I'll just briefly start with how I got into this particular type of journaling. When I was in my migraine recovery experience spanned several years. And during the first year, I made a lot of progress through mindset shifts and what people call brain retraining. And that helped a lot. And I made a lot of progress. And at a certain point, I hit a wall, and I was like, okay, I need to add another tool to my toolkit. And in this chronic pain recovery world, a lot of people talk about journaling. And there's this amazing woman named Nicole Sachs, who has her own podcast called The Cure for Chronic Pain. Highly recommend.
Cool.
And she teaches her particular method of journaling. So I just started learning from her stuff and copied her method, and basically dove into that practice out of desperation to heal from migraine. And it wound up being incredibly transformative, and it unlocked that next layer of healing for me. And the deeper I dove into it, you start by you learn from someone else's method and you copy exactly what they're doing because you don't know what you're doing at first. And then as I got comfortable with it, I started to improvise. I started to add in other, things I'd learned other places, add in things that just came to me intuitively, and just sort of organically came up with my own method of journaling, which is very much about an inner dialogue, and is a dialogue between like my kind, loving, wise self, that part of me that, you know, if a friend comes to me in distress, I don't have to think about what to say. It just comes to me, and it comes to most of us, I think. You know, you just tell the friend that you love them and that, you know, you get it and all the things. And so it would be a dialogue between that loving part of myself and the symptom. And the symptom represents a frightened part of myself. So the loving part of myself would ask questions like a therapist does. And then the frightened part of myself, or the symptom, would just, you know, brain vomit, word vomit onto the page. And then the loving part would then reply in a loving, acknowledging, reassuring way. And this was just like so unbelievably, incredibly healing my physical pain symptoms. So that just blew my mind.
Wow.
Like, how is this even possible?
Well, you're merging journaling, therapy, coaching, and self-compassion.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's magic.
And that nervous system that was feeling unsafe and sending these pain signals gradually started to feel more safe with me. And it didn't have to speak to me in these pain signals anymore, because it knew that I was going to actually check in with it and check in on how I was doing. It could just speak to me peacefully and be acknowledged. And so this was just a revelation, and it changed everything for me symptom-wise. And then I grew to really enjoy this practice. Like, first I did it as like out of desperation, but as I got into it, I was like, I love connecting with myself this way. So I just kept doing it even once the headaches had subsided. And I discovered something was happening. I was like, oh, like when I connect with this frightened part of myself in a compassionate way, the frightened part softens. And then there's like something else emerges underneath. It's like the frightened part was like a tight shell. And then when the shell softens and opens, my inner guidance is right in there. Wow. And I can like get in touch with it. So I added a part 2 to the writing practice. So the part 1 was like a loving check-in with the fear inside of me, however it was showing up, if it was showing up in like tense shoulders or a headache or just nasty self-critical thoughts. Have like a loving check-in with it. The fear softens. And then the part 2 is I bring to mind a time in my life when I felt just like the most free and at home in my own skin and alive. For me, it happens to be usually this like particular memory of like when I was 5 years old, just like running around like a wild child, free. I bring that part of me to mind, and then I dialogue with that part. I call it my inner free spirit. Those are just the words that work for me. And I dialogue with that part, and I'm like, dear inner free spirit, what are you feeling? What would you like me to know? What are you inviting me into? And that is my reset. I don't always do it every day, but when I'm going through big changes, I do it every day to anchor myself and come back to the part of me that doesn't want to hide under the bed all day, but that actually wants to expand.
Yes. And, you know, it truly takes such love from our soul, right? Speaking to our spirit, speaking to our human body, screaming down at the ego to say, get the F out of bed and let's thrive and let's play and let's heal and let's create. And that process is so delightfully intuitive. And when I teach about developing your intuition, it really is a mindfulness process in that being present as you described, right? In the presence of it, you can hear, what is it that I need to do next? And you are also asking, you are truly asking, what do I need to hear right now? Right. Yeah. So it's so loving. Like I was just melting listening to you just talk about it. I'm like, I want to do this right now. Like, this is great. And some people have a resistance to journaling for whatever reason, right? Or they'll roll their eyes at it.
Most people, I
Yeah,
think.
most people,
including me. It took me a whole year of hearing about it to actually say, fine, I'll try it.
Fine, right? I interviewed Tracy Rickstrew for this show recently, and she said, a healthy person has lots of dreams. An unhealthy person has one dream. I was like, oh my gosh, right? And it just really hit me in dealing with this back pain. It's like, all I want to fix, because it's so new for me. I'm not used to having that pain, right? And so when we hit a crossroads of, I just want to change, I just want to feel better, when we've hit that catalyst truly, then we go, you know what? Maybe I've rolled my eyes at journaling, gratitude journals, meditation, all the things. It works for everybody else. Maybe it'll work for me now. Maybe it didn't work for me when I was in my head all the time in my 20s, but maybe it'll work for me now, right? Or if you're in your 20s, you get to get out of your head a little bit and shed the ego. So we can all just try it. It doesn't hurt to try. My godmother used to take me shopping in New Jersey, and she would go, just try it on. I'm like, Viv, that's horrendous.
Yes.
But once in a while, I'd try it on. I'm like, damn, she was right. Just try it.
And the funny thing about it, and I keep finding this in like every area of my life that, because there's always like new balls of yarn that we need to unravel, is that it starts as the problem that I want to get rid of. And I'm just desperate to try anything to get rid of the problem. And then what I discover through finally trying the thing is like, oh, I didn't need to get the problem was that I was trying to get rid of this and treating it as a problem. And actually, this is just yet another part of me that needs me to be kind to it. And then it'll relax and the ball of yarn will unravel all on its own.
Well said. I'm just starting to read this book right now called The Obstacle is the Way.
Ooh, I love that title.
It's great, right? And even just in I'm only on the first 30 pages and I'm like, yes, right? It's everything you just said. It's like, all the things, right? We grow through what we go through. The only way out is through. And it's like, but I don't want to suffer anymore. Haven't I suffered enough? And it's like, but
totally.
Maybe this is the hard work, and maybe it's not as hard as you think it's going to be. And maybe continuing to suffering is harder.
Yeah, exactly. It's more familiar.
Yes. Our ego likes that.
It's more familiar. It's going to take getting uncomfortable in the unfamiliar. But what if there's like actually a lot more ease than we expected on the other side?
Well, there always is. And
there always is.
I truly believe that there's only two emotions. There is love and fear.
Totally.
So, right? So when you're talking about the fear, staying in bed, can't get out of fear, we're labeling it as something different in our head, right? We're labeling it as, oh, well, people are going to judge me or, whatever it is, whether it's judgment, insecurity, jealousy, it's all fear, right? And then everything under love, peace, kindness, grace, happiness, joy, it's love. So I tell my clients, when you're in that moment of making a choice to just do the damn thing or let that thing go, whatever it is, ask yourself, am I making a choice from a place of love or am I making a choice from a place of fear? And if you're really honest with yourself in the moment, it feels pretty icky to go, well, I'm making a choice from a place of fear and I'm just going to do that.
Yeah, totally. And that is the exact same paradigm that I mentioned. I initially learned journaling from this therapist named Nicole Sachs from her podcast. And the exact same thing. Like one of her things that she would say over and over again is you can take action fueled by the fear tank or by the love tank. And it's going to have a totally different impact depending on which tank you're fueling from.
And totally different emissions.
Completely different emissions, different everything. And it's like I keep having to learn the same thing and remind myself of the same thing over and over and over again when I wake up in that cold sweat and I'm like rattled with fear and I'm like, oh no, the fear is here. The fear is here. Oh no, like, what am I going to do? I have to get rid of it or hide from it. And then it's like, okay, just remember, you just have to meet the fear with love. And then everything's good.
Right? As soon as you turn on one light, the darkness dissipates.
Yeah, it turns into something else and it alchemizes. And the other thing I love thinking about is that like the tension, which we look at as such a problem. And I mean, I still do. I hate feeling tension in my shoulders. It doesn't feel good. But
it's like a gathering of energy. And so when we meet it with love, there's this intensity of love energy that becomes available to us that can be put into that pivot that we're making, for example.
That's true. And this is why energy healing works and Reiki works.
Yeah.
And those things have like scientific data behind them, measurable data that shows when you send energy of love into the body, there is a transformation that occurs. And
Yeah.
when I was getting my Reiki certifications, I'd asked my Reiki master teacher, can I give Reiki to someone who thinks it's bullshit?
Mm.
And I was very curious about that. I'm like, does that person need to accept the healing? Do they need to agree with the healing? Do they need to understand the healing? And she said, always ask someone if they would like the healing, even when you're about to do it. So if you get that confirmation, that confirmation is also occurring on the soul level. So on a human level, they don't need to believe in it or not. It's going to work.
Yeah.
It's going to work as well as it can. Right.
You know, when you shared that, what I was thinking of is like, because it's a transmission of love is one way to describe it, right? So it's like your partner might not be into therapy and self-help and all that stuff that you're into, dear listener, if that's you, but they can receive your love regardless, and it's going to have an effect on them.
It will. I mean, think about, we're fostering this dog, right? And on his first night here, he was really scared. So all we had to do was send love. Whether or not he was open to receiving it, I don't know, but he softened up the next day. So it definitely had an effect.
And animals are such great teachers for this energy work, nervous system work. So my 3 cats have taught me so much about exactly what you just described. You know, it's like if they're acting wild and thrashing around, it doesn't need to be controlled. Trying to control it is actually going to exacerbate it. It's like, I need to get into a loving state, and their nervous system perceives that and attunes.
Yeah, they're the best. They just
so
know. They know when we're sad. They know when we're out of it. They're such little healers, aren't they?
They're the best and the cutest. We've talked about all of this already, but I'll just say during this time of pivot, I'm very lucky to live close enough to the ocean that I can go sit by the ocean when it's a little warmer than it is right now and do my journaling there. And there was this one morning that was like really in the thick of all of when the fear was at its highest for me. And I did my morning journaling practice and I was like, wow, I started this journaling session in such intense fear. Like I felt like I was like sweating and my skin was melting off me. It was like one of those intense feelings. And just at the end of a journaling session, which is usually winds up being around 10 minutes for me, I felt completely alchemized, like just in a completely different energy state. And I felt calm and secure and safe in that moment. And I was like, wow, this is so wild. And I didn't know this back in my 20s and my 30s. Like back in my 20s when I was working in publishing and I was pitching my own magazine. I wanted to start my own magazine. And I had a lot of great ideas. Like, sure, I was like coming out of school and was, you know, didn't have much to show for myself experience wise, but I was able to somehow put together this pitch deck and get a meeting with someone at a big newspaper. And that was an incredible accomplishment. And then when they came back to me and said, you know, we've decided to pass on this at this time, I took that as like, shut it all down. Like that, you know, it was just felt so uncomfortable to me. And I don't have any regrets about not pursuing that particular thing further. But what I am so happy about is that I now have these tools that allow me to like meet the discomfort and hold it and let that intensity of feeling pass so that I can put the next step forward toward the things that I want to do now at this point in my life.
That's beautiful. We can all take a page from that book for sure. Earlier, we briefly talked about how some people don't like journaling, right? And then hearing you talk about going to the ocean and doing this and working through this process, even on days where you're like, right? When we have that feeling and we want to feel better, there's something in between, right? I call it the ego, but there's other stuff going on. There's something in between. I feel like crap and I'm going to do the thing that makes me feel better or potentially makes me feel better if I've never done it before. And that in between, right, that's that bridge of possibility to saying yes. And what squanders it often is, I believe, often feelings of not just doubt, but am I even worthy enough? Am I worthy enough to feel better? Do I deserve to feel better? Do I have too much guilt and shame in my life? Do I have regret in my life? Do I deserve to suffer? Should I just stay here in this dark, shitty hole and feel like crap for a little bit longer before I try something new? It's this yarn we spin and it's total bullshit. So how does somebody go from sitting in their muck to going, I choose what's best for me? And it's just taking the next step.
Here's what comes to me hearing that question is remind yourself that you're going to be kind to yourself, that you're sitting down to journal, not to flagellate yourself, not to spill your guts and then leave yourself hanging. Like, you know, if you went and cried on a friend's shoulder and they were like, all right, you done now? Goodbye. No, you're going to your journal or whatever your practice is, because it doesn't have to be journaling. There's, you know, so many practices out there, but you're going to your practice in order to be kind to yourself, to spill your guts and then love up on yourself. So I think we have gone through so much of our lives, most of us, not expecting that we're going to get that loving response back. And it's a retraining to remind ourselves. So first of all, build that into your practice, build the loving response to yourself into your practice, and then remind yourself that that's what you're going to get when you sit down to spill your guts is the loving response.
Yeah. And even if someone doesn't feel like they're worthy of having that loving response, you are because you're human, because you're here. And it feels hard to be here sometimes because it's the complete opposite of what we could imagine anything like the afterlife or heaven or whatever you want to call it is, right? And it's totally fair to go, it's hard here. And that's why some people say this is school, earth is school, it's soul school, graduate school, whatever you want to call it. So we're here to do the work. I believe we all signed up to do the work, to know ourselves better, to be on a journey that takes us on a spiritual path, whether we intentionally are choosing that or not. And it's through working with practitioners like you, if they get a chance to work with you one-on-one or in any of your workshops, and listening to shows like yours, like mine, and other amazing healers out there that can facilitate processes like these where change truly happens. So you're worth it. You deserve it. And we love you.
You're worth it. And, you know, the dog and cat thing is a great example to go to when we have these questions about, am I worthy? It's like, do I look at my cats and wonder if they've like done enough good deeds to deserve my love? Like, no, they just exist.
A cat will never ask that question.
We'll never, ever ask that question. And we need that support ongoing. I've been listening to your podcast now on my morning walks because, like, sure, I do this work, I know this stuff, but I need to hear it because I'm a living, breathing being.
Thanks, love. I'm so glad. It's just truly wonderful to be helpful. And on that note, I have one final and very fun question for you. So the lottery in the United States has hit $1 billion a few times now, and it may continue to do so. So regardless of whether it is or you scratch and win, let's say tomorrow you hit it and you've got hundreds of millions of dollars. Two parts. What's the first thing you do when you find out you won? And then once you have the money, how do you spend your time?
Oh my gosh. The first thing I do when I find out I won is I do a dance and I scream and I tell my husband that he can quit his job.
Yes, amazing.
And then
how do I spend my time is definitely holding retreats for it could be for everyone, but the first place my mind went is holding retreats for women that want to expand into their next chapter in life and need a safe place to have fun and explore it and just let those dreams run wild.
Oh my gosh. And so let's visualize this for a second. Where is your first big retreat?
On any gorgeous, warm beach in tropical weather.
There we go. We're going to the islands, ladies.
We're going to the islands. We're going to the islands. Absolutely.
I can't wait. I will be there. Oh my gosh, Anna, this has been so wonderful. You are such a joy, such a wealth of information, and truly a healer in all of the work you do. And I hope everybody goes to your website, annaholtzman.com, and explores, check out her events. Definitely follow the How to Trust Yourself podcast to continue conversations like this on an even deeper level. And I hope that you will be back on the show, and I can't wait to be on yours.
I can't wait to have you on mine. I'm so glad to get to know you. It's such a thrill. And thank you so much for having me on.
My pleasure, darling. Have a beautiful day.
You too.